I'm Terrie, and I used to be a smoker. I want to give you some tips about getting ready in the morning. Don't start smoking, and if you do smoke, quit. I truly do that, which I've never ever seen one. I don't want anybody to have to go through what I'm going through.
Today we'll be discussing the case of Terrie Hall. Terrie was an athletic girl, a cheerleader in high school, worked in an office after graduation, and eventually became a mother as an adult. In this image, you see Terrie smiling, wearing a purple knitted sweater with a scarf around her neck. But what many might not know is that behind that purple polka dotted scarf lies something one likely doesn't see too often in their everyday life. Because behind the scarf is a hole in Terrie's neck. For many years, Terrie was a heavy smoker, and after more than one diagnosis of smoking-related cancer, she was forced to have her voice box removed from her body. After this procedure, Terrie went on to feature in several commercials and travel around the states warning people about the dangers of tobacco use. You might recognize her from these very popular CDC ads, and you probably remember her for the voice this operation left her with. But what many might not know is that behind the face of a woman sharing her story with the world were several health battles she was fighting for many years. What followed as a result of Terrie smoking is truly alarming, and you'll be stunned to see how she went from a once healthy teenage girl to a woman suffering with health issues that are among some of the most unimaginable. You might be shocked, but how she got there is unfortunately a tale much more common than one might think. But before we get into this case, just to introduce myself, my name is Petal Palmer, and on this channel I post anything medical, mysteries, and crime. If that is something that sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing if you end up liking this video. But before we get into this case, I'd like to get into the sponsor of today's video, Angry Birds Dream Blast. When I was researching this case, I came across this blog post. So I obviously looked into it, and I saw that according to the CDC, one of the recommended things to do to help in quitting smoking is to distract yourself by, quote, playing a video game or do a puzzle. And then when I looked deeper into it, I actually saw this 2022 study by researchers at Rowan University that named Angry Birds as one of the games that was frequently endorsed by people who've quit smoking. So when they reached out to collab, I thought that this aligned perfectly. Angry Birds Dream Blast is a casual puzzle game that's easy to pick up and start enjoying. It's great if you just want to relax and take your mind off of the stressors of the day. I really like playing it whenever I have some downtime, and some of my favorite things about it are that each level brings a different type of challenge. It has the look and feel of a dream world, and there's new content all the time, which keeps the game fresh and entertaining. If you're feeling like you need a game to distract yourself or unwind for the day, be sure to download Angry Birds Dream Blast now. You can find the link in the description or just scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you, Angry Birds Dream Blast, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get into this case. Terrie Lynn McNutt Hall was born on Tuesday, July 19, 1960 to parents Loretta Schenkel McNutt and Gordon Esbin in the city of Mount Clemens in Macomb County, Michigan. She had two brothers, Stephen and Roger, and also eventually a stepfather named Bobby Wayne Sink. From all accounts, growing up, Terrie seemed to live a relatively normal childhood. She stayed in Michigan for most of her adolescent life. That was until 1973, just when she was about 13 years old, when she moved from Michigan to Davidson County, North Carolina. When Terrie first moved to North Carolina, she had gotten a job working in tobacco fields. This was something she did outside of school alongside her brother. In the 1970s, working in tobacco fields was actually quite common for children, especially in North Carolina and many other states. In fact, it was also common in various other countries, including Malawi. This is, however, a heavily debated topic because while it did happen back then, it's actually something that still occurs today. And many people warn about the dangers of having children spending long hours exposed to tobacco doing work like this. For years, especially as of lately, many have been pushing for policy changes to prohibit this from happening. But according to NPR, quote, Child labor laws are more lenient in agriculture than in other industries, and efforts to change that have repeatedly failed. With her brother, Terrie would get to the fields early in the morning before sunrise, and their job entailed them stringing the tobacco on the stringer. This is the process of tying small bundles of tobacco leaves to hang off of a horizontal stick. The bundles would be separated just enough to let air go through them, yet close enough so that there remained enough space on the stick to fit more of the bundles. It was typically women and young children who were in charge of stringing. It became such a respected process that till this day, there are actually stringing contests held at the North Carolina State Fair every year. Once the stick was completely full, they would be handed over to men who would then lay them out in rows inside the barn. A 2020 blog post described a person saying that when they worked in tobacco fields back in the day as a child in North Carolina, while women were in charge of stringing, handling, and stacking the filled tobacco sticks, men were responsible for priming and filling sleds with tobacco leaves to pull to the barn. With Terrie doing this, every now and then there would be a little worm that would come through, but compared to the other things she saw while working, this was probably the least of her concerns. Because in this job, Terrie was able to see where they stored the tobacco. And in this very location, there were rats, there were mice, and the tobacco wasn't even washed before it was processed. Seeing the conditions the tobacco was stored in definitely was a factor in Terrie not having the desire to ever smoke. However, it was within that same year of her moving to North Carolina when, for the first time, she picked up a cigarette to smoke it. One day, when Terrie was about 13 years old, she, along with some friends, went on a camping trip in North Carolina. For this trip, everyone packed their normal camping supplies. But to everyone's surprise, one of her friends in particular snuck in a pack of cigarettes. Now, after getting situated somewhere, she and her friends decided to try smoking it. But very quickly after starting, Terrie felt extremely sick. She was coughing a lot during it and was just not feeling great afterwards. Terrie's father himself was in fact a smoker, but after that experience, she thought smoking wasn't for her and she was going to just leave it at that. A couple years later, Terrie finally began high school. She went to Forbush High School in a small town called East Bend, located in the foothills of North Carolina. Sometime in high school, Terrie ended up joining the cheer team, and she actually competed on the cheer circuit. Being a competitive cheerleader, she was an athlete. She trained regularly and, along with her teammates, made sure to keep her body healthy. But with being an athlete, there came rules that she had to follow in order to make sure she stayed in as healthy of a shape as possible. Terrie described that her cheerleading coach was very strict in high school, so some things that other students were allowed to do, her team was not. In particular, other students at the school were allowed to smoke cigarettes. But Terrie and her teammates were not. In fact, in her school, they had something called smoke-offs. And these were designated areas where students who did smoke were allowed to go in and smoke there. These smoke-designated areas were something that were implemented in some high schools in the 1970s. As not only a way to promote student rights, but also to keep some separation between student smokers and student non-smokers. An article by the LA Times from August 28, 1986 mentions that for school districts in California, a law for this was adopted in 1978 as a way to stop those who smoked from doing it in washrooms to instead have them do it in the designated areas away from those who didn't. By the way, by washrooms, I mean restrooms. Shout out to my Canadians. But because she was an athlete and with how strict her coach was, she and the team weren't even allowed to be seen in these areas whatsoever. There was a big problem with this though. At the age of 17, all of Terrie's friends smoked. So it was in these smoke areas where they usually hung out. And it wasn't just this, but every time she hung out with them, even on the weekends, she was always the odd one out who wasn't smoking. She already had that bad experience from cigarettes when she was at camp at age 13, but with how often she was not allowed to be around her friends, she decided to just give it another chance. She tried doing it a few more times, and time after time, it started becoming a lot easier for her to do it and not feel sick. She would do just a little bit of smoking, not a lot, but this was just a way for her to fit in and be just like her friends. Describing, quote, "It was the cool thing to do, and that it also made her feel grown up." Because of her coach's rules, whenever she was in school, she would actually sneak into the smoke-off areas so she wouldn't get caught. Anytime she would go in with her friends, they would huddle around her, helping her hide so that the coaches and teachers wouldn't see her whenever she went inside the smoke-offs. And she did a good job at hiding because not once did she ever get caught. But with this, in a later presentation, Terrie would mention that if she did get caught, she, quote, "might not be standing in front of you today." Eventually, Terrie graduated from high school in 1978, and it was only then when her amount of smoking seriously increased. After graduating, Terrie moved to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where she got an office job, and everyone smoked at this office. Initially, Terrie was an occasional smoker, only doing it every so often, but it got to a point where whenever she wasn't smoking, she would get serious urges too. At just around the ages of 18, 19, she would suffer cravings, she would get irritable, and she had a really bad cough. And at the time, she wasn't able to recognize it, but Terrie was addicted to the tobacco. Tobacco products are made from the leaves of various plants of the Nicotiana species, which are commonly referred to as tobacco plants. The reason tobacco products are so addictive is because they contain something called nicotine, and nicotine is highly addictive. Nicotine stimulates the release of a chemical called dopamine in the brain, and this chemical causes feelings of pleasure and makes people feel good. Why it's so addictive is because over time, the body begins to crave that good feeling it got from the nicotine. According to the FDA, nicotine changes how your brain works, and this is what causes someone to have cravings for more of it. Nicotine is what makes someone addicted to tobacco products and continue using it. And while it may not be solely the nicotine that causes all of the health problems associated with tobacco products, it is the mix of the various chemicals within the products that cause serious harm to one's body. When somebody is addicted to tobacco products, this is called nicotine dependence. And this is more than just the person wanting to continue using the products, because with nicotine dependence, even if somebody wants to stop, with how addictive it is, it's very much possible, but extremely hard to do this. There are several physical and psychological factors that make this very difficult. Nicotine withdrawal can cause a variety of symptoms, including urges or cravings to smoke, irritation or grouchiness, feeling jumpy or restless, a hard time concentrating, trouble sleeping, hunger or gaining weight, and feeling anxious, sad, or depressed. Over time, these symptoms will fade as long as the person doesn't use the tobacco products again. It's just that, of course, with any addiction, it's not easy to do that. Within just 1 year, Terrie was up to smoking 1 pack of cigarettes a day. At first, she didn't think she was addicted because she genuinely enjoyed smoking. She didn't really know what an addiction entailed, but all she knew was that she just needed to smoke, even saying that she, quote, made a career out of smoking. Terrie described that she felt like this addiction happened overnight because of how soon she became addicted. It got to a point where Terrie would light up a cigarette first thing when she woke up in the morning, whenever she was on the phone, whenever she finished eating, and she would do it at the end of the day right before shutting her eyes to go to sleep at night. Sometime around 1981, when Terrie was about 21 years old, she had given birth to a daughter named Dana. Although her daughter was born 2 months premature, weighing 4 pounds 9 ounces, she overall ended up relatively healthy. On June 26, 1989, Terrie gave birth to her second daughter, Sarah Ashley. However, it was just a few years later, on November 15, 1992, when Sarah Ashley unfortunately passed away at age 3. Sarah Ashley was also born premature, 3 months early, weighing less than 2 pounds. And according to the Winston-Salem Journal, Terrie stated that Sarah Ashley was born with cerebral palsy, which was related to her premature birth. Smoking is cited as being linked to preterm birth. With how often she was doing it, it didn't take too long before Terrie started experiencing adverse effects of smoking. In particular, there was one issue she felt on a regular basis. Around Around 1985, when she was 25 years old, Terrie first noticed that she had a sore throat. And this wasn't a short-term thing because this actually remained persistent for over 16 years until something serious happened. Because it was when she was 40 in 2001 when Terrie's health took a turn she would have never expected. Sometime around the end of 2000, Terrie noticed that she had a sore on the inside of her mouth. At first, she thought that this sore was maybe a reaction to something she'd eaten, or that she'd possibly accidentally bit the inside of her cheek. But it did look a bit odd, and she never had anything like that before. Eventually, she went to a routine dentist appointment, and her dentist himself thought the sore not only looked odd, but that it looked kind of suspicious. He told her that he'd like to perform a biopsy of the sore, and Terrie said, okay, sure, that's fine. This biopsy was very painful for Terrie. It was once the results came back when she received some startling news, because she found out that she had oral cancer. Terrie was diagnosed with a cancer of the mouth called squamous cell carcinoma, the most common type of head and neck cancer, and one in which one of the main associated risk factors for includes heavy tobacco and alcohol use. But notably, according to the Winston-Salem Journal, this was apparently not Terrie's first time being diagnosed with cancer, because she was apparently diagnosed in the early 1990s with vulva cancer. I just couldn't find anything else of Terrie speaking on this. Fast forward to 2001, it was very soon after the oral cancer diagnosis when Terrie got started on treatment for it. She began doing radiation to treat it, but even throughout the entirety of radiation treatment, she was still dealing with an extremely sore throat. She attributed this sore throat to her smoking, thinking she was, quote, just smoking too much. Because even throughout treatment, she continued smoking, describing that her thought at the time was, quote, you'd smoke too if you had cancer and you were going through radiation. In fact, it was during this time when she was doing treatment when she had gotten up to the most she's ever smoked before, because Terrie was now smoking up to 2 packs per day. She described her mindset at the time stating, quote, I didn't think I had to quit. The radiation was getting rid of the cancer, so I could still smoke. And she later on described that when she was younger, mainly in high school, she didn't think cancer would be something that could actually happen to her. She described that when she was younger, she thought she was invincible and that only happens to other people. After doing 33 treatments of radiation, Terrie finally finished with treatment in June 2001. And although at first she thought this would be it, this unfortunately would be far from reality for Terrie. On Friday, August 10th, 2001, Terrie's mother Loretta passed away at age 59. This was a hard time for her on top of already having to deal with cancer treatment. And not just this, but she was still dealing with the sore throat. In fact, she described that her voice began to deteriorate and it hurt for her to even eat or swallow. Despite this, she continued smoking. It was finally in December 2001 when she decided to go see a doctor to get her throat checked out. She went to an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and like they'd done with the spot in her mouth, this time they performed a biopsy of her vocal cords. They used a scope they put through her nose to go down to her throat, and she described this experience as kind of being rough. Just the next day, Terrie received a phone call, and when she answered, her doctor was on the line. But from this call, she could just tell something was wrong, because her doctor told her that they not only wanted her to come down to their office, but they wanted her to bring somebody with her. When she got to the office, they informed Terrie that she had a tumor on her larynx. And with this, she again was diagnosed with cancer. When they told her this, Terrie wasn't thinking about the area the cancer was in. She was just thinking about the fact that she had cancer, period. They further told her, look, Terrie, the only way we can treat this is if we remove your larynx, aka your voice box. Still, even after hearing this, it didn't register in her mind what that meant or what that would entail. All she knew was that she had cancer, and that's what she was worried about. Laryngeal cancer is considered rare in North America. In the US, 12,500 people are diagnosed with it each year, and 4,000 pass away each year from it, with the risk of developing laryngeal cancer being about 1 in 200 for men and about 1 in 840 for women. One of the biggest risk factors for developing this cancer is smoking tobacco products. And the average age of diagnosis for this cancer is 66 years old. While most people diagnosed with this cancer are are above 55 years old, there are a small percentage of younger people who are diagnosed. Amongst different treatments for it, surgery remains a main method for treatment in a procedure that is called a laryngectomy. This procedure involves surgically removing part or all of your larynx. Terrie was going to be receiving a total laryngectomy, meaning her entire larynx was going to be removed. Nothing could have prepared her for what this would actually entail. Essentially what happens is the surgeon makes an incision and removes the larynx. But before they close up the incision, they create something called a stoma. And this is a hole or opening in the neck. Your throat is also called your pharynx. And this has two main pathways. The esophagus is your food pipe and the trachea is your windpipe. The trachea is right in front of the esophagus and the larynx is directly connected to the trachea, just right above it. Since the larynx is above the trachea, air passes through your upper airways, so your nose and your mouth, through the larynx before reaching the trachea and subsequently your lungs. But when you have a laryngectomy performed, you're removing this connection. So there's no way for the air from your nose or your mouth to make it down to the trachea anymore. The purpose of putting the stoma or hole in one's neck is so that the person can breathe through the stoma, because they won't be able to breathe through their nose or their mouth anymore. Just a couple days after being diagnosed, Terrie received a phone call, and she was met by a woman named Nancy Reynolds. Nancy was from a local support group of people who've received laryngectomies, who, by the way, refer to themselves as laryngectomies with two E's on the end, different from the spelling of the actual procedure, which ends in a Y, or when plural ends in IES. At the time, Terrie didn't even know what this word was, but eventually Nancy asked if she would be able to come visit Terrie at her home because she wanted to speak with her and show Terrie what she was going to look like after having this procedure performed. Terrie agreed to having Nancy come over, and it was during this meeting when Terrie saw that Nancy had a hole in her neck. It was only then when Terrie first recognized what was going to be happening to her. But even after seeing this, she was still having very strong urges to smoke. In fact, she described how she couldn't wait for Nancy to leave from her house because her addiction was so strong, she was still craving a cigarette right then and there. Once Nancy left, Terrie lit up a cigarette and smoked it. And still, it hadn't truly hit her what was going to be happening. Terrie continued smoking throughout the entire period as she waited before her surgery. In fact, on the morning of the surgery in January 2002, literally just before she headed inside the hospital, right at the hospital's front door, she pulled out a cigarette and smoked it. And just as the surgeon was wheeling her into the operating room, he told her, quote, "Miss Hall, you have smoked your last cigarette."
And I remember thinking, I didn't even know I smoked.
After administering anesthesia, they started the procedure by creating an incision in her neck from one ear to the other. They then opened up the space, removing the voice box, and stapled the area back together, leaving her with the stoma in her neck. When Terrie woke up after the surgery, she was in bed in the ICU, and the first thing she remembered is a nurse looking at her standing at the side of her bed. This nurse asked Terrie if there was anything she could get for her, so Terrie tried to respond to the nurse. But as she opened her mouth to try to say something, she was unable to speak. She could not get any words out. In fact, she described, quote, "Nothing came out of my mouth, not a breath, not a syllable, not a sound, nothing." It was right after this when Terrie felt 2 tears stream down the side of her face, and it was only then when the reality of her situation truly hit her, that her voice box was now gone, completely removed from her body. Still obviously suffering from the nicotine addiction, after the surgery, Terrie actually tried to smoke a cigarette to see if it would be possible, but she wasn't able to, and she described this saying, quote, "Even when you have your larynx removed, the craving does not stop just because something's been taken away. That's why I want to stress to you the importance of never starting or quitting as soon as you can at a young age." After 23 years and being one of her doctor's youngest patients, it was finally then, at age 41, when Terrie quit smoking. For those first 3 months after she got the surgery, she did not talk whatsoever. Instead, she would communicate with others either by writing things down on paper or by mouthing the words to her family so that they could hopefully read her lips. She avoided meeting with her friends because she didn't want them to see her like that, so she only really communicated with her family during that time. And it wasn't just her friends who she didn't want to see her, but she had a hard time herself seeing herself like that. She avoided looking in the mirror just so she wouldn't have to look at this hole that was now in her neck, or even look at the scars that were now on her jaw from the incision. She didn't know whether she'd be able to talk again or not, and she was beginning to lose hope. That was, however, until one day she received a package in the mail, and when she opened it, she noticed inside there was a device called an electrolarynx. This is a device that uses vibrations to produce sound, helping people speak after getting their voice box removed. Terrie described that typically people used an electrolarynx on their neck to try creating sound. But because of all the radiation she had, this was not possible for her. So she instead had to use a straw.
Tell me if you can understand what I'm about to say. Okay, let me try it one more time. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. I am Darth Vader.
This device might not be as preferred because using an electrolarynx requires the person to hold it up with their hands. So eventually Terrie got a hands-free device, which is the device that you can see she places inside the stoma. As you can see, Terrie was able to find light and make jokes about her situation, describing how one time a little boy had came up to her after a presentation and told her that she sounded like Darth Vader. She also described one day when she was feeling a bit down on herself, she decided to go through a drive-thru and told them the following.
One day I wanted to really irritate somebody because I was kind of feeling sorry for myself. I went through the drive-thru at the fast food restaurant. And I said, I want. And they said, go to the next window, please. They didn't like me very well.
She even joked about how she was never good at singing, but now she has a good bass voice. But humor or not, she described being a laryngectomy was very difficult. Fortunately, she described that nothing hurts regarding her throat, such as swallowing, for example. Even further stating that nothing in her throat area hurts like how it did when she had a sore throat from smoking. But still, nonetheless, there were many everyday things that she was no longer able to do. When she got her laryngectomy performed, they told her she'd have to remove part of the back of her tongue. Fortunately, this didn't interfere with her taste. But of the things she couldn't do, she couldn't inhale. Her nose would just run because she couldn't blow her nose. She couldn't blow out candles. She couldn't smell, and she couldn't whistle. She described how she would use her mouth for eating and talking, but that now her nose was, quote, good for nothing. Further stating that with her nose and mouth not being used for breathing anymore, they were rather like ornaments for her, jokingly stating that even during Christmas, she paints her nose red like Rudolph. Whenever Terrie would shower, she would need to wear a plastic cover over her stoma because if water were to get into the stoma, it would go straight to her lungs and she could choke or drown. But even so, there would still be occasional times once in a while when the water would accidentally get inside the hole, describing that it would be a similar feeling to whenever you drink water and it goes down the wrong way and you cough. Because of this, Terrie stopped going swimming because of the risk it would entail. She did describe that there were some laryngectomies whose thumb was large enough to cover their hole who did in fact dive into some water. But at the time in 2005, she described that they had more guts than she did and she couldn't do it. Terrie would eventually have 3 grandchildren from her daughter Dana, with the eldest being born sometime after the laryngectomy she got in January January 2002. She described, quote, "This is the only voice my grandson knows. I miss being able to sing lullabies to him. When children ask me why I talk like this, I tell them it's because I used to smoke cigarettes. Don't ever smoke." She initially had a hard time finding her purpose and a reason to go forward. But after praying and really trying to reflect, it didn't take too long before Terrie realized exactly what her purpose was. And this was going to be reaching out to the public to encourage others, especially the youth, to never light up a cigarette and not be like her. After encouragement by Nancy Reynolds, the laryngectomy she had met at her home before the procedure, Terrie joined a local support group for laryngectomies called Western Piedmont Speak Easy in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And that same year, in 2002, after having the laryngectomy performed, Terrie became an advocate and program coordinator with the Survivors and Victims of Tobacco Empowerment, or SAVE organization. Through this organization, she traveled to middle and high schools around North Carolina, representing SAVE and raising awareness on tobacco-related issues. Not only did she speak at various schools and community settings in North Carolina, but she also was invited by the health department of the state of Utah to speak to schools. And later in April 2011, she spent a week going on tour to speak at 11 different schools in Utah. During these presentations, Terrie would inform the students about both the short-term and long-term effects of smoking, letting them know some things that they would struggle with, including them being more susceptible to colds, developing a persistent cough, shortness of breath. They'll get weaker when doing anything a little bit less than strenuous efforts. And she even said that chewing tobacco can result in malformation or disfigurement of the mouth. Not only did Terrie warn them of the effects, but using pig lungs, she showed the differences between a set of healthy lungs versus a set of lungs that a smoker would have, which is a drastic difference from looking pink and full to looking shrunken and black. Likewise, she just gave many stats regarding the fatalities of tobacco. In particular, to really drive the emphasis, she referenced the difference in the daily fatalities in the states between alcohol and tobacco. Today, excessive drinking accounts for approximately 488 fatalities per day, which is more than 178,000 per year. And cigarette smoking accounts for approximately 1,300 fatalities per day, which is more than 480,000 per year. But then on top of that, of the 480,000 people cigarette smoking kills each year, around 41,000 had never even smoked a cigarette, but were rather affected by secondhand smoke. That's about 113 people per day. Secondhand smoke is when somebody is exposed to smoke in their environment. Exposure of secondhand smoke occurs when somebody ends up inhaling the smoke that is being breathed out by somebody who's smoking or burning tobacco products. This is also known as environmental tobacco smoke or passive smoking, and it can occur in many places, including at homes or work, but it can also occur in public places such as restaurants or bars. Terrie described this during one of her talks, sharing an image of a baby, stating, quote, "When mom and dad smoke, the whole family smokes." Meaning, if somebody is a parent and they smoke at their home, they're putting their child's health at risk as well. In addition to living in Lexington, North Carolina with her stepfather and helping out with his automobile business, Terrie went on to work with several different health and advocacy organizations and do volunteer work, even describing that now she was more busy than she was before she got cancer. She partook in various different campaigns, but the one that you and most people likely recognize her the most from is the 2012 campaign she did with the CDC called Tips from Former Smokers, also known in short as TIPS. This is a campaign featuring real stories of former smokers, encouraging people, especially young and middle-aged people, to never start smoking. Across the span of 3 months, Terrie was featured in ads as part of the $54 million anti-smoking campaign. But before even featuring in this, she was also shown in various other related TV campaigns with different organizations. In 2004 and 2006, Terrie partook in ads created by the UNC School of Medicine's Tobacco Prevention and Evaluation Program, or TPEP. This was created for the North Carolina Health and Wellness Trust Fund's Tobacco Reality Unfiltered, or True Media campaign to warn teens against dangers of smoking. This entailed her starring in the 2004 ad called Travel Log and also the 2006 and 2007 ads Truth and Consequences, showing youth's reaction to Terrie. Following these ads, Terrie was noticed by several people and organizations, and it would be the SAVE organization that would give Terrie's name to the CDC to further share her story. Very shortly after, Terrie began filming with the CDC, with the first PSA airing in March 2012. In the first ad, Terrie showed how she got ready for each day, showing that she'd put on her wig, dentures, and then her hands-free device through the stoma in her neck.
I'm Terrie, and I used to be a smoker. I want to give you some tips about getting ready in the morning. First, your knee, then wig, then your hands-free device, and now you're ready for the day.
In 2013, this became the most viewed video on CDC's YouTube channel with over 2.5 million views and the most comments they've ever gotten on a video. Now, as of March 2025, it's their third most viewed video, sitting at 12.6 million views. These ads were placed on TV, magazines, billboards, bus stops, just a lot of public places. And she became so recognizable during the 12-week campaign, people would even approach her in public, with Terrie specifically mentioning being approached in drugstores and receiving hugs as people would thank her for inspiring them to quit smoking. More than 100 million people in the States saw these ads, and Terrie was happy with the reach and number of lives this campaign was able to help. During the campaign, calls to the free smoking quit line 1-800-QUIT-NOW doubled, and visits to smokefree.gov, a website to help people quit smoking, tripled. And in September 2013, the CDC themselves stated that 100,000 Americans quit smoking for good following the campaign. And they estimated that 1.6 million Americans attempted to quit after it. Terrie's advocacy extended beyond the ads and the talks she did. For nearly a decade, she was a team captain for her hometown in North Carolina for Relay for Life, an annual community-based walking or running fundraising event hosted by the American Cancer Society. For 9 years, since 2004, she served as a secretary for the International Association of Laryngectomy, served as a president of the Western Piedmont Speakeasy Laryngectomy Group. Also, in 2007, she served as a volunteer and as a representative for her legislative district at the Celebration on Hill event hosted by the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. And overall, she served so many roles relating to laryngectomies, cancer, and anti-smoking organizations. Because of all of the work she had done to raise awareness in the community, she began receiving various awards and accolades. On Tuesday, December 6, 2005, she received the North Carolina Health and Wellness Trust Fund's inaugural Distinguished Service Award in Preventive Health, an award to recognize top community leaders in North Carolina who have demonstrated a tireless commitment to the health and wellness of citizens in North Carolina. Likewise, Terrie also received awards at a few annual meetings of the International Association of Laryngectomies, where she was the secretary. This included the Outstanding Service Award in Little Rock, Arkansas in 2008, and the Outliving Life Award in Kansas City, Missouri in 2011. And very notably, because of all the work she had done to encourage people to not start smoking, in May of 2013, Terrie was awarded the Surgeon General's Medallion, which is, quote, one of the highest honors in public health, being the fourth highest honor within the U.S. Public Health Service. The impact she made on people was in fact very strong. Dr. Tom Frieden, the 2009 to 2017 director of the CDC, stated, quote, I believe that for me and for literally millions of other Americans, Terrie put a face to the people killed by smoking each year in the U.S. Terrie recalled being approached by a former smoker in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, who told Terrie that she was the reason she quit.
She put her hands out to me and she was starting to cry, and she said, I quit smoking because of you. And of course I started crying and had cold chills, and It was pretty powerful.
And according to an April 12, 2011 article from the Salt Lake Tribune, one of the students Terrie spoke to, a junior named Eric at the Taylorsville High School in Utah, stated that he'd been trying to quit smoking for a few years. But it was after hearing her speak when he and his friends officially were able to quit, stating in an interview, quote, "It's better to quit before the problem gets bigger. She had an impact on me, so I bet she will have an impact on other students as well. She's helping other people not go through the same thing that she went through." In 2012, Terrie stated that she was finally happy with life now.
But I'm happy with my life now. I've had to settle for my consequences that have been dealt me because of the actions I took at an early age.
And remember how I mentioned she was afraid to swim because it was very risky? Well, she described how when people say that she can't do something, she does it. So after 9 years of not being underwater, in 2011, she took her equipment off, put her thumb over her neck, and went underwater for the first time since the laryngectomy. And she stated that that experience was a feeling like no other. Being able to swim made her feel very good, describing it as, quote, "one of the happiest days of her life." But despite all the good she was doing in the community, it didn't stop the fact that Terrie was left with serious health struggles as a result of her smoking. In fact, throughout those years, she would go on to be diagnosed with cancer a total of 11 times. All different types, mainly affecting her head, neck, and lungs. She had done head, neck, and throat surgery, and they removed her palate. In fact, in a March 28, 2013 article by USA Today, she stated that for the past 2.5 years, every month she'd been doing chemo 3 out of 4 weeks of the month as maintenance chemotherapy, meaning that she'd been doing that since sometime around the end of 2010. And with how her health was looking, she described, quote, "My fear now is that I won't be able to see my grandchildren graduate or get married." When Terrie was diagnosed with cancer for the 11th time, they tried treating it with radiation and even surgery, but none of these methods were working. And just a few weeks after the second round of CDC's Tips Ads began to air, it was in the summer of 2013 when Terrie's doctors discovered that the cancer not only spread to her brain, but spread to the rest of her body. Eventually, Terrie was admitted into the Forsyth Medical Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, but her condition continued to get worse. Still, even while sick, she wanted to continue spreading the message. According to an article by HuffPost, Terrie insisted on being filmed in her hospital bed to show people what could happen as a result of smoking. And because of this, the CDC came to the hospital to film Terrie.
I wish I'd never seen a cigarette in my entire life. I truly did. I wish I'd never ever seen one. Much less pick it up and smoke it.
There's 2 different hospital scenes they filmed of Terrie, but it was just 2 days after filming that very last one, on Monday, September 16th, 2013, when Terrie passed away at the age of 53. Just a few months before she passed, on May 23, 2013, Terrie was honored by the CDC. And just 5 days after Terrie passed away, on Saturday, September 21st, 2013, a funeral service was held at Pinedale Christian Church, the church she was a member of in Winston-Salem. While Terrie's mission was to prevent people from smoking, there was one person in particular who she certainly was trying to reach. And this was her own daughter, Dana. Like Terrie, Dana began smoking as a young teen, but she eventually realized that although her mother made the ads to convince others not to smoke, she believes that, very importantly, Terrie was trying to convince her not to smoke. All of Dana's children were born prematurely, and Dana finally began working to quit smoking in January 2012 during her second pregnancy. She saw her doctor who prescribed her medication to help do this, and she described that it was difficult, but anytime she struggled with quitting, she would look at the ad of Terrie during her final days in 2013, stating that they gave her, quote, the motivation she needed to not go back to it. When asked to describe who she loves the most in 2012, Terrie stated that the most supportive people were her daughter Dana, her grandson, her stepfather Bobby Winsink, and her fellow laryngectomies. Before Terrie, there were other commercials made that were aired to the public. One that stands out in particular are the commercials featuring a woman named Debi Austin. These were created by the California Department of Health, with the first one airing in 1996. And what stood out with this one was the fact that Debi showed herself smoking a cigarette through the stoma in her neck.
They say nicotine isn't addictive. How can they say that?
Debi was born on April 13, 1950 in Illinois before moving to LA at age 4 in 1954. She too started smoking young at the beginning of junior high school in 1963, just at 13 years old. And soon enough, once in high school, she was already up to 1 pack a day. Debi began for similar reasons as Terrie, of wanting to look cool and older. And also, like Terrie, her first time trying smoking was not enjoyable as she felt sick, got dizzy, and even threw up. But like Terrie, Debi described she had a gradual addiction. And also like Terrie, she was diagnosed with laryngeal cancer in 1992 and subsequently had a laryngectomy. While Terrie stopped smoking after the laryngectomy, Debi continued, and so in the ad, she showed how bad her addiction was to continue going even after having that procedure performed. Debi's ads reached many people, especially in the state of California, with Dr. Ron Chapman of the California Department of Public Health describing her as the, quote, most recognized and talked about California tobacco control ad. Further stating, quote, Debi was a pioneer in the fight against tobacco and showed tremendous courage by sharing her story to educate Californians on the dangers of smoking. Debi went on to raise awareness, speaking out about tobacco addiction. She quit smoking after the ads first aired, but unfortunately, she too went on to suffer with various forms of smoking-related cancer and other illnesses for the rest of her life, including things like emphysema and stomach cancer. In an October 2011 video, she stated the following.
People would look at me with their cigarettes, and it's like, ooh, if I ever get like that, I'd quit. Why do you have to wait till you get like this, fool? Do you think this is a lot of fun?
Debi passed away from laryngeal cancer also in 2013, a few months before Terrie, on February 22nd at age 62. Some interesting points Debi brought up was that when she started smoking, she didn't remember ever seeing a no smoking sign. She said that even nurses would be inside the hospitals smoking in the same area the babies were in. She also brought up how accessible smoking was, stating that in 1963, all you needed was a quarter and you would be able to buy cigarettes. According to data from the CDC, tobacco use has remained for several years the leading cause of preventable disease, disability, and death in the United States, and this is also a true stat for Canada as well. The World Health Organization states that the tobacco epidemic is one of the biggest public health threats faced in the world, with 22.3% of the world's population using tobacco in 2020. Tobacco kills up to half its users who don't quit, killing more than 8 million people per year, including 1.3 million non-smokers who are exposed to secondhand smoke. And around 80% of the world's 1.3 billion tobacco users live in low and middle income countries. There are more than 7,000 chemicals in tobacco smoke, and according to cancer.gov, at least 250 of them are known to be harmful, such as cyanide, carbon monoxide, and ammonia. And of the 250 known chemicals, at least 69 are known to cause cancer. Most people who smoke are aware of the dangers of tobacco and do in fact want to quit. It's just that a lot of people don't have the resources to be able to treat their addiction. There are two main types of treatment used to help quit smoking: medications and behavioral counseling. As of July 2023, only 32 countries have national comprehensive cessation services that include either full or partial coverage of the cost to assist tobacco users from quitting. This is only around 1/3 of the world's population who have access to these services. There have been many efforts made to address the tobacco epidemic. Since Since 2003, the World Health Organization has adopted a framework convention on tobacco control, which is an evidence-based treaty providing a global response to the tobacco crisis. As of July 2023, 182 countries are parties to this treaty, covering more than 90% of the world's population. With this treaty, they introduced 6 measures to combat the crisis in an acronym called EMPOWER, which entails monitoring tobacco use and prevention policies, protecting people from tobacco use, offering help to people to quit tobacco use, warning about the dangers of tobacco, enforcing bans on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, and raising taxes on tobacco. So far, 66 countries have banned tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, also known as TAPs. This is only 1/3 of the world's countries. Cigarette smoking is the most common form of tobacco use around the world, but there are several different tobacco products, including water pipe tobacco, cigars, smokeless ones such as chewing tobacco and snuff. But also a lot of the newer nicotine products include heated tobacco products, or HTPs, and electronic cigarettes, aka e-cigarettes. Like other tobacco products, HTPs contain nicotine, which is addictive, and they include harmful chemicals, both ones that are found in cigarettes and ones that are not. Likewise, what's quite popular now, especially amongst the youth, are e-cigarettes. These include vapes, vape pens, and electronic nicotine delivery systems. While these don't contain tobacco, most typically do contain nicotine and other harmful substances. According to the FDA, nearly all tobacco use begins when the person is a child or in adolescence, and early onset increases risk of developing tobacco-related diseases. In the US, every day, more than 1,500 children under 18 years old try their first cigarette, and almost 90% of them become regular daily smokers when they're adults. In general, smoking can cause cancer almost anywhere in the body. And it's not just cancer, but when youth do use tobacco, various other health issues can occur, including reduced lung function, impaired lung growth, and early onset of chronic respiratory disease. But still, these products are still sold, with the World Health Organization criticizing the tobacco industry, stating, quote, "The scale of the human and economic tragedy that tobacco imposes is shocking and also preventable. The tobacco industry is fighting to ensure the dangers of their products are concealed, but we are fighting back." World No Tobacco Day started in 1987, and it's an annual day on May 31st to raise awareness and inform the public on the dangers of tobacco use and what can be done to combat it. There are so many benefits to quitting smoking, including, as stated on the CDC's page, an overall improvement of health status, lower risk of diseases, and better quality of life. They stated that quitting can add as much as 10 years to one's life expectancy. And there's not just long-term benefits, but there's short-term ones as well. Within just minutes of quitting, one's heart rate drops. Within 24 hours, the blood's nicotine level drops to 0. And within several days, one's carbon monoxide level drops to the level of somebody who doesn't smoke. The earlier somebody quits, the greater health benefits they will receive. But no matter at what point you quit, there will be both immediate and long-term benefits. So it's never too late to quit. There's no right age for this to happen. At any age you quit, you will be tremendously benefiting your health. As mentioned, smoking tobacco products is a risk factor for laryngeal cancer. According to the American Cancer Society, the rates of new cases has been falling about 2 to 3% each year, and the death rate has fallen the same as well, likely due to less people smoking cigarettes. While some high schools used to have designated smoking areas during Terrie's days in the 1970s, these smoking areas in North American schools are now prohibited. And this wasn't just a thing of schools, but smoking used to occur in offices, airplanes, and even, as mentioned from Debi Austin, inside hospitals. The first Surgeon General's report discussing the adverse health risks from smoking was published in 1964. This followed by the first law mandating health warnings to be placed on cigarette packages the following year in 1965, followed by the 1969 ban of cigarettes being advertised on TV and radio. By 1972, the Surgeon General then published a report sharing the potential adverse effects of secondhand smoke in those with pre-existing disease. It was then in the 1970s when smoking bans in public places such as government buildings and airplanes were implemented, and it was in the 1980s when the first high schools began prohibiting smoking inside the school and on school grounds. A February 12, 1987 article from the Washington Post reads, quote, "Designated smoking areas for students, which cropped up in the early 1970s in the name of student rights, are being taken away in the name of student health." Which, might I tell you, this was a whole issue in itself because students were literally protesting this from happening.
The students are divided, and so is the faculty.
It's the students that want to smoke that come here. It's away from everybody else that doesn't want to smoke in the school. So they could come down here, they could have their cigarette or any other form of tobacco they want to use, and that's it. And it's not bothering anybody else.
If the school tries to teach you good health things through the health classes and things like that, then I don't see the purpose in them allowing students to smoke. It's just going back on what they're trying to teach us.
Kids are going to smoke, they might as well have a smoking area for them because they're going to do it anyways. If they don't do it out here, they'll do it in the bathrooms or behind the buildings or whatever.
I think if we want to ruin our lungs by smoking, it's our business. I mean, they let the teachers smoke and everybody else, so why not us?
One 11th grader named Jim from Arundel High School in Gambrills, Maryland, stated, quote, "They gave us these rights and now they're trying to take them away. I don't think it's right. We're 16 and old enough, and they should let us. Everyone is going to cram into the bathroom. I'll be there." Another 16-year-old student named Kim stated, quote, "Once they give us the right, they can't take it away. They aren't going to be able to punish all the kids who smoke. What are they going to do? Suspend us all?" This was a similar concern mentioned in the LA Times article from August 28, 1986. While initially the concern was going to be that children would smoke in the washrooms, the principal of the school, Kenneth Catlin, reasoned non-smoking students would likely object to the smoking in the washrooms and that all of the students who will be in the school in 3 years will never have experienced a school where smoking was allowed. With him further stating, quote, "By having smoking areas, you are saying it's okay to smoke. I think we'll be sending a slightly different message." As of the time this Washington Post article was published in February 1987, 73% of the 2,000 school districts that were surveyed by the National School Boards Association had implemented bans on students smoking on school grounds. Before legislation, various different facilities implemented their own voluntary smoke bans, whether it be some motel chains, restaurant chains, airlines, mass transit systems, healthcare facilities, and even schools. But otherwise, beforehand, there were no laws put in place prohibiting smoking in public places from happening. But finally, the Pro-Children Act, now part of the No Child Left Behind Act, was passed in March 1994, prohibiting smoking from happening inside federally funded school facilities. This was just for smoking indoors. However, smoking was still allowed outside on school grounds. There are no federal laws, and many state laws don't prohibit outdoor smoking on school grounds. Nonetheless, many schools just started banning smoking themselves, period. These bans continued throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, and now most school districts have a written policy against smoking. While a lot of people thought Terrie's CDC ads were powerful, there were mixed emotions on several aspects of them. Some called them scary, disturbing, horrifying, and others expressed their discomfort while watching them. Under a Reddit group called Commercials I Hate, a poster described the ads paralyzing them with fear. One Reddit comment reads, quote, "As a nicotine addict who's trying to quit, these ads actually do more harm than good, at least for me. They rope you into a doomer-like mindset about the addiction, making you crave dopamine even more. It also reminds me of vaping, which makes it worse. I know that sounds twisted, but it's true." Another reads, quote, "I remember so many of those weird anti-smoking ads from a while back, and I was hoping they would have stopped with them. I'm very much against smoking and all, but I don't want to see all that when I'm trying to watch something." And there was a comment reading, quote, "These ads seriously need to be banned. They're inappropriate and offensive to the vast majority of Americans who do not need or want to be lectured to because we don't smoke. smoke. I don't care if they want to educate people on the dangers of smoking. They're disturbing spots that traumatize innocent people. There should be a national effort to force them off the air. While on the other hand, one reads, quote, "They work. I quit smoking after 22 years because of them." And another reads, quote, "I quit smoking because of that commercial, and it's been 7 years." So there's definitely mixed thoughts on whether these ads are effective, because while the purpose of the ads are kind of to scare the public away from wanting to smoke, some think even seeing the ads makes no difference, while others vouch that it has helped them quit. And as seen, there are concerns of the ads being shown randomly while watching TV, being described as traumatic or startling. Overall, Terrie's purpose with these ads were to stop people from smoking and prevent them from even starting. Terrie stated, quote, "I wish someone had shown me when I was thinking about smoking in high school what could happen to me." Terrie stated to USA Today,
"I may not prevent other people from dying, but maybe I can prevent them from having to go through what I've gone through and what I'm going through."
Reaching out to a professional is a great first step in helping to quit smoking. The CDC has a how to quit smoking page, including the 1-800-QUIT-NOW number to speak to someone to get help. The number is available in different languages, and there's also the Quit Start app available in app stores, including on iPhone and Google Play, which is a free app made for people who want to quit smoking or tobacco use. For my fellow Canadians, there's also a page on the Canadian Cancer Society with various different resources as well. The information for these resources will be in the description, so if you or anyone you know smokes or uses tobacco and would like to quit, please click the link in the description to get started on your journey. Terrie left everyone with some words of wisdom. She didn't want people to feel bad for her. She just wanted them to not start smoking like she did.
They took my voice away, but you know what? I'm here today, and I'm speaking out. I'm speaking out to you, reaching out to you. And I also know I'm different. I talk different. That makes me different than you. But you know what? There's good things to being different. There are good things to being different. They're not all bad. It's okay to not be one of the crowd, because you know what you can do? Find the crowd, start your own crowd, and be that crowd. Be that peer that doesn't smoke. If I can urge, or one of you can see me in your mind and remember me when you go to light up a cigarette. And my vision, ugly as it may be, can stop you from lighting up. Then my efforts, standing here today, talking to you, struggling for my breath as I try to talk, is all worthwhile. If I can prevent one of you, or you just remembering me, will prevent you, then my efforts are well met.
But yes, that is it for this case. What are your thoughts on this story? Do you think the ads do more harm than good, or do you think they're helpful? Please comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any other videos on medical cases, crime, and mysteries. Bye now.